Imagine waking up one day to find that the money in your wallet, the cash you've worked hard for, is suddenly worthless, stripped of its value overnight. This isn't a dystopian novel or a Hollywood blockbuster, it's real history, and it happened right here in America during the era of Colonial Scrip. Welcome to the Money Trail, where we delve into hidden financial histories that have shaped our world. Today, we're investigating Colonial Scrip, how America's own currency was banned by the British. Let's set the stage. It's the 18th century and the American colonies are thriving. But there's a problem. The mother country, Britain, controls the money supply. They send over coins, but not enough to meet the colonists' needs. So, what do these resourceful early Americans do? They create their own currency, Colonial Scrip. In 1690, the Massachusetts Bay Colony became the first to issue this paper money to pay soldiers fighting in King William's War against France. Other colonies soon followed suit. By 1750, all but one colony had its own currency. It wasn't just used for war efforts, farmers, traders, and artisans used it for daily transactions too. But this self-sufficiency didn't sit well with the British. They saw Colonial Scrip as a threat to their power and economic control. After all, if colonies could print their own money, what was stopping them from becoming independent states? So, in 1764, Parliament passed the Currency Act, banning the issuance of legal tender paper currency in every colony except Quebec. The stakes were high. This act choked off economic growth, making it harder for colonists to trade among themselves and with other nations. It also heightened tensions leading up to the American Revolution. Over the next decade, Colonial Scrip would play an increasingly important role in the struggle for independence. But that's a story for another time on The Money Trail. Colonial Scrip, an alternative currency developed by American colonists, became a vital tool for economic prosperity in the face of British restrictions. This homemade money took many forms, from printed paper to hand-minted coins, and was issued by local governments or even individual towns. One notable example comes from Massachusetts, which began printing its own paper currency as early as 1690. The colony's paper scrip, known as bills of credit, helped fund military expeditions against French forces in Canada during the late 17th century. By injecting this currency into the local economy, Massachusetts successfully stimulated trade and growth when British options were limited or non-existent. But it wasn't just about circumventing the crown. Colonial Scrip often held more purchasing power than its British counterpart. In 1764, for instance, £1 sterling in Britain was worth approximately 108 shillings. However, due to high demand for specie among American colonists, that same pound could buy only about 80 shillings worth of goods in the New World. As a result, Colonial Scrip frequently traded at parity with, or even at a premium over British currency. This economic boom led to increased self-sufficiency and confidence among the colonies, which further fueled tensions with Britain. After all, if these upstart Americans could prosper without London's financial backing, what need did they have of the mother country? Yet, despite its success, Colonial Scrip wasn't without flaws. Because it was issued by numerous entities rather than a central authority, quality control varied widely. Some scrip was well-designed and difficult to counterfeit. Other versions were crude and easily faked. Moreover, excessive printing of scrip could lead to inflation, diminishing its value and eroding public trust. Nevertheless, Colonial Scrip proved that alternative currencies could thrive and challenge an established financial system. And while the British eventually managed to suppress this grassroots monetary rebellion, they couldn't extinguish the spirit of innovation it represented. That spirit would resurface during the American Revolution, when Colonial Scrip once again played a starring role in the fight for independence. As we delve deeper into the story of Colonial Scrip, it's crucial to understand the political context that gave birth to this unique form of currency. Tensions between the American colonies and Britain were escalating, setting the stage for a confrontation that would change the course of history. The seeds of discontent were sown in 1765 with the passage of the Stamp Act, a direct tax on the colonies by the British Parliament. The colonists argued they had no representation in this foreign body, leading to widespread protests and boycotts. This was just the beginning of a series of taxes and laws imposed by Britain that would fuel resentment and resistance. One such law was the Currency Act of 1764, which prohibited the colonies from issuing their own paper money. The British argued this was necessary to stabilize the economy, but the colonists saw it as another attempt to exert control over their lives and livelihoods. This act would have far-reaching consequences, including the rise of Colonial Scrip as a means of bypassing British financial restrictions. By 1774, tensions had reached a boiling point. The First Continental Congress convened to address grievances against Britain, issuing a Declaration of Rights and Grievances that outlined their demands. Among these was the repeal of the Currency Act, further illustrating the importance of monetary independence to the colonial cause. In this volatile atmosphere, Colonial Scrip took on new significance. It became not only a symbol of economic self-sufficiency, but also a powerful tool in the struggle for political freedom. As we'll explore in the next segment, these homemade currencies would play an instrumental role in funding the American Revolution and challenging the mighty British Empire. So, while the story of Colonial Scrip may seem like a footnote in financial history, it is deeply intertwined with the fight for American independence. The spirit of innovation and defiance embodied by these humble banknotes helps shape a nation and continues to inspire those who challenge established systems today. 1764 marked a pivotal year in American financial history with the passage of the Currency Act by the British Parliament. This law aimed to tighten control over the colonies, specifically targeting colonial scrip, the paper money issued by individual colonies. The Currency Act was an extension of the Trade and Navigation Acts, which regulated trade between Britain, its colonies, and foreign countries. However, this new act went further, directly interfering with the colonies' ability to issue their own currency. It forbade American colonies from issuing any bills of credit, a form of paper money often used in place of hard currency like gold or silver coins. Before the act, colonial scrip had been crucial for economic development. With limited access to British currency, colonists relied on these locally issued banknotes to facilitate transactions and stimulate local trade. But Britain saw this as a threat to its economic interests. By restricting the use of colonial scrip, Britain hoped to enforce stricter commercial ties, ensuring that colonies traded exclusively with the mother country and paid their taxes in British sterling. This decision had profound implications. Colonial scrip had allowed colonies to fund public projects, pay soldiers, and even lend money to farmers during poor harvests. Its abolition created financial stress, leading to widespread shortages of currency, higher prices, and even unemployment. Yet, far from quelling colonial discontent, the Currency Act fanned the flames of resentment. It became a symbol of British tyranny, fueling dissent against British rule. In fact, it played a significant role in uniting the colonies financially, prompting them to seek alternative ways to raise revenue and challenge British authority. Ironically, the very measure intended to strengthen British control over its American colonies contributed significantly to the growing divide that would ultimately lead to revolution. The Currency Act of 1764 serves as a stark reminder of how financial policies can shape political destinies, setting the stage for one of history's most epic struggles for independence. 1764, a pivotal year in the history of America's financial liberation. The British Parliament, aiming to reinforce its authority over the colonies, passed the Currency Act, a law that prohibited American colonies from issuing their own paper money. This act aimed to stabilize commerce by eliminating colonial scrip, which was depreciating at an alarming rate compared to British currency. However, this decision had far-reaching consequences that played a significant role in fomenting revolutionary sentiments. Before the ban, American colonies enjoyed relative financial independence through the issuance of their own paper money, colonial scrip. This system facilitated trade, business growth, and public projects. The scrip, although depreciating, served as an effective medium of exchange for everyday transactions within the communities. However, the British government, wary of this autonomous financial structure, decided to enforce stricter regulations over currency issuance. The Currency Act required colonies to obtain approval from the British Crown to issue paper money and set stringent conditions for such authorization. These restrictions severely hampered economic growth in the American colonies. As a result, businesses suffered, public projects stalled, and common people found it increasingly difficult to carry out daily transactions. Moreover, the interest rates on loans from British banks surged, making borrowing costs exorbitant for colonial entrepreneurs and administrations alike. The economic hardship inflicted by the Currency Act sparked outrage among colonists, who saw it as an overreach of British power. Farmers, artisans, and merchants faced financial distress due to restricted access to credit. Public officials struggled to fund essential services like road maintenance, education, and law enforcement, further fueling resentment towards the British rule. This financial stranglehold imposed by the Currency Act not only crippled economic growth, but also ignited a fire of rebellion against colonial rule. The Act's underlying message, that Britain held ultimate authority over America's financial destiny, struck at the core of colonists' aspirations for self-governance and autonomy. As tension continued to build, the Currency Act served as a rallying cry for revolutionaries who sought independence from British rule. The economic impact of this act played a significant role in shaping American political consciousness and fueling the flames of rebellion that would ultimately lead to the birth of a new nation. Colonial scrip, the seeds of American monetary policy. The Currency Act of 1764 wasn't just a unilateral move by the British to exert control over its colonies, it was also an essential turning point in America's financial history. This act prohibited the colonies from issuing their own currency, forcing them to rely solely on British coinage or printed bills, often in short supply. To understand this significant piece of legislation, let's first look at how colonial scrip worked. Colonial scrip was a form of paper money issued by individual colonies as legal tender for public expenses like roads and bridges. It was typically backed by the tobacco crop, which served as collateral. This system fostered economic growth and stability within the colonies since they could fund projects without relying on scarce British specie or burdensome taxes. However, with the passage of the Currency Act, this thriving financial ecosystem came under threat. The British government feared that colonial scrip would undermine its control over trade and finances in the Americas. But for the colonists, the stakes were much higher. Their very livelihoods and autonomy hung in the balance. As tensions escalated, so did resistance to the act. Many influential Americans, such as Benjamin Franklin, spoke out against it, arguing that it hindered economic development and infringed upon colonial rights. In fact, Franklin even testified before the British Parliament, stating that the shortage of money caused by the Currency Act was a significant grievance leading up to the Revolutionary War. The struggle over colonial scrip laid the groundwork for American monetary policy. The Founding Fathers recognized the importance of controlling their currency and understood that it was essential to maintaining independence from foreign powers. When drafting the Constitution, they included provisions granting Congress the power to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and of foreign coin. By examining this historical context, we can see how colonial scrip sowed the seeds for America's unique financial path. The fight against the Currency Act not only fueled revolutionary sentiment, but also established a bedrock principle of American democracy that the power to shape monetary policy should reside with the people and their elected representatives, not distant rulers or corporate interests. In our next segment, we'll delve deeper into the life of Benjamin Franklin and explore his pivotal role in this struggle for financial self-determination. While colonial scrip is a crucial part of America's financial history, it has been clouded by myths and misconceptions over the years. One such myth is that these notes were primitive or easily forged, which justified their ban by the British. However, this notion doesn't hold up under scrutiny. Colonial scrip was actually quite advanced for its time. It featured intricate designs, watermarks, and signatures to prevent counterfeiting. In fact, they were more secure than many European currencies of the period. The real reason behind their prohibition lies not in their design, but in their purpose, challenging British control over American commerce. Another misconception is that these notes cause rampant inflation. However, research shows that colonial scrip had relatively stable values. For instance, during the period when Pennsylvania issued its own currency, prices remained remarkably consistent. The colonial economy thrived, contradicting the belief that such currencies inevitably lead to economic chaos. It's also important to debunk the idea that these currencies were created out of desperation or ignorance. They were carefully planned and managed tools, often issued in response to specific needs like funding public works or supporting local industries. Benjamin Franklin himself played a significant role in promoting colonial scrip. As the Postmaster General for the colonies, he recognized the potential of this system early on. He advocated for it as a means of reducing reliance on British imports and fostering economic self-sufficiency. In conclusion, colonial scrip was neither primitive nor inflationary. Instead, it represented an innovative approach to monetary policy, one that empowered colonists and challenged imperial authority. As we continue exploring this fascinating chapter of financial history, remember that truth often lies beneath the surface of popular myths. Colonial scrip, a legacy of financial determination. As we've uncovered, colonial scrip played a pivotal role in shaping early American economics. It wasn't just an attempt at creating local currency, it was a bold statement of self-reliance and autonomy that sparked conflict with the British Crown. Let's recap. In 1709, Benjamin Franklin printed the first colonial scrip in Pennsylvania, non-interest-bearing paper money backed by the colony's silver reserves. This currency facilitated trade and economic growth without draining precious metals out of the colony. By 1764, 12 out of 13 colonies had adopted some form of this system, fostering self-sufficiency and reducing dependency on British imports. But why does this matter today? Firstly, understanding our financial past helps us navigate our present. The controversy surrounding colonial scrip ignited debates over states' rights and monetary policy that still echo in modern discussions about federal versus state control of currency. Secondly, the spirit of innovation embodied by colonial scrip continues to inspire creative solutions in today's financial landscape. From cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin to community currencies designed to boost local economies, there are parallels between these contemporary experiments and the original colonial scrip. Lastly, remembering this chapter of history serves as a reminder of ordinary people's capacity to drive transformative change. The colonists who used and defended colonial scrip were not economists or statesmen. They were farmers, artisans, merchants, everyday individuals who recognized the power of collective action and seized control of their economic destiny. So, while colonial scrip may no longer exist, its legacy lives on in the enduring principles of innovation, independence, and resilience. And as investigative journalists uncovering hidden financial histories, we can't help but marvel at how such a seemingly obscure piece of financial trivia continues to resonate, challenge, and inspire us centuries later. In The Money Trail, truth is indeed stranger and more enlightening than myth.